Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. Carry on. Lin Li nodded his head as the disaster that had happened then was widely known indeed, and even a foreigner like him had heard people mention it. Half the people had allegedly lost their lives, while the other half fought to leave the cursed place. The once prosperous Sire town had been reduced to ruins. Even after 20 years, nobody was willing to step into this place of death. However, Lin Li had never thought that the Sire bandits had originally been the militiamen of Sire town. I heard that Vanscore was the first one to discover the spread of the plague. Duke was a natural at telling stories, and made them feel as if they had gone back to 20 years ago as he pieced the story together. As Duke recounted what had happened, Lin Li slowly gained a deeper understanding of what had happened during that disaster. After Vanscore discovered the spreading plague, he notified the head of Sire town immediately, hoping to find a way to curb the expanding disease. Unfortunately, his warning fell on deaf ears, and the plague was treated like an ordinary illness. Only a few doctors came to conduct an inspection, but nothing happened after that. Vanscore was desperate at that point, but he refused to give up, even going to Roland City to notify the Castellan. Sadly, he was only a small leader in the militia, and did not even make it past the gates of the Castellan's mansion before he was stopped by guards. Then, the tragedy happened. The plague spread with terrifying speed, taking thousands of lives in less than a week. Fear and desperation clouded Sire town. Everyone wanted to leave this cursed land, including some who had been infected as well. Their desire to live was so strong that nobody wanted to think about what would happen if the infected ones made it to Roland City. On the morning of the 7th day since the plague started, their exodus began. However, they were met by the army of Roland City. Thousands of those infected were killed, while the lucky survivors were mostly thrown into dungeons to go through an endless period of quarantine and observation. Only when it was certain that they were not infected were they released from the cold dungeons. Vanscore and his men were some of the few lucky survivors of that disaster. Vanscore had warned them in time, hence nobody was infected. They later managed to escape Sire town in the midst of the chaos. Then, the Sire bandits were born. The Sire bandits started out at the Star Moon Forest, which was located at the north of Duland, and grew from a group of a few dozen men to one of the top 10 bandit groups of the Breezy Plains. Under Vanscore's lead, the Sire bandits focused on infiltration of various organizations. Their influence had now spread to every part of the Breezy Plains. From Castellan mansions to adventurers' guilds, signs of the Sire bandits could be seen in every corner of the place. Even the Castellan of Roland City could not destroy them with his army, although he had long wanted to remove them. This Vanscore is talented indeed. Lin Li had to give it to this bandit chieftain. He'd managed to turn a small group of bandits into a syndicate of a few thousands in only 20 years, climbing from a wanted criminal to collecting protection fees on large scale. Not everyone was capable of that indeed. What about now? Are they still at Starmoon Forest? No. Duke shook his head. They moved to the Dragon Mountains after destroying the largest bandit syndicate there. Mage Felix, do you need a map of Dragon Mountains? How do you know I'll need one? Lin Li looked at Duke suspiciously. He was acting stranger and stranger today. The vivid storytelling earlier had been suspicious enough, and now he even knew to prepare a map when Lin Li hadn't asked for it yet. Since when did he become so observant? If he really was so observant, he wouldn't have tried something funny in front of Norfeller earlier. I guessed. Duke looked at Lin Li carefully, and squeezed a smile to make himself appear calm, only for the tremble in his voice to give him away. Really, Lin Li's smile turned cold. Seems like you want a replay of that little fire trick earlier. That's not the case, Mage Felix, please listen to me. Duke retreated unconsciously, but as he lifted his foot, he suddenly recalled that he was standing in front of a true mage who was capable of killing him if he wanted to. It would be useless even if he retreated to the gates of Duland City. Alright, I'll give you a chance to explain yourself. All of this information had been given to me by Mr. Basel from Duland's library. Mr. Basel from Duland's library? Lin Li frowned. He was aware of this place in Duland. The Supreme Council had not built a guild of magic in the breezy plains, hence, the mages here usually held their discussions in libraries, and those soon became a popular spot for mages in every city. Dulin's library was no exception, and Lin Li had always paid close attention to it since it might well represent the highest standard of magic in Duland. However, the name Basel was unfamiliar to him. Lin Li had done some preparation like reading information about this place as well as asking around. He tried to get a better understanding of this place through different means, but not once did he hear the name Basel. Yes, Mr. Basel. He's the librarian of Dulin's library and my father's friend, hence he has always been looking out for me. I went to the library after leaving the Adventurers Guild to ask him what he thought of this whole issue. And this Mr. Basel told you this story? Yes, Mage Felix, Duke nodded, and dug out a lambskin scroll from his pocket. Oh, right. Mr. Basel asked me to give you this map as well, he said you'll need it. I see, how nice of Mr. Basel. How about this, Duke, help me find out when he's free so that I can thank him over a meal. Okay. After sending Duke away, Lin Li stayed in his room to study the map closely. Judging from the fresh ink, he could tell that it had been drawn in the last couple of days, maybe even after Duke had approached him. However, the lines of this map were quite distinct, with detailed labels. Based on it all, it was hard to imagine that it had been drawn in a rush. It was too detailed, everything from a forest and a ditch to every tree on Dragon Mountains could be seen on the map. This looked impossible to Lin Li. The only plausible explanation would be that this Mr. Basel had already known Dragon Mountains very well since a long time ago. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to draw such a detailed map in such a short amount of time. If that was the case, things were going to get interesting. Why would a librarian know the hiding spot of the Sire bandits so well? Even a fool could make the connection. Seems like I'll have to get involved in this, Lin Li smiled, and rolled up the map to put in his pocket. Duke was quick. It had barely been 2 hours, but he had already brought back Basil's reply. Mr. Basel said that there's no need for a meal, but if Mage Felix has the time, he is welcome to visit him at the library. Haha, seems like Mr. Basel can't wait, either, Lin Li smiled secretly as he let Duke lead him and Norfeller to the library. The library was near the Castellan mansion, and was the place with the best environment in the whole of Dulan City. Clean and spacious roads, a plaza paved with marble right in front of the library's door, sparkling fountain and pigeons flying around. All of these elements added to the sacred air of this place, a treasure cove of knowledge. Mages in long robes, carrying thick books, hurried across the plaza. Judging from the high elf's print on the covers of the books, they had to be advanced spells. The trio crossed the plaza and approached the door of the library. Before they could tell the guard what they came for, he had already welcomed them respectfully. Welcome, esteemed Mr. Mage. Mr. Basel would like to invite you to the meeting room at the 2nd floor, where he is waiting for you. The library's hall was quiet as the mages sat on both sides of the long table, holding thick magic books in their hands as they buried their heads in them. Nobody spared a glance when the 4 of them walked in through the entrance, treating them like little more than flies buzzing nearby. The 4 crept through the library's hall, and followed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The guard who led them knocked twice on a false door, before they heard a hoarse voice coming from the other side. Please come in. Lin Li smoothed the creases in his robe before he pushed open the door. The meeting room was sort of small, with tall rows of bookshelves lining both sides of the room. Books of every genre imaginable filled the shelves, and they could almost smell the ink as they stood in the room. The thick carpet they stood on felt soft and clean, with a coffee table and a few bamboo chairs. The room looked well-designed even though the layout was simple. On the other side of the room was a balcony, which allowed the rays of the setting sun to shine into the room, casting it in a layer of glittering gold. An old man sat serenely in the evening rays as he slowly rocked the bamboo chair to an unknown rhythm. On his left sat a small coffee table with a teapot and 4 teacups, while a green magic staff leaned on his right. The gem sitting atop the staff was not all that shiny, but the magical waves coming from it made Lin Li hiss unknowingly. Good evening, Mage Felix, the old man spoke in a slow and mild manner, a twinkle of a smile in his eye as he looked at Lin Li. Tea. Good evening, Mr. Basel. Lin Li bowed to the old man on the bamboo chair, with a hand on his chest. Please take a seat, everyone, no need for formalities. Just treat this like your home. The old man entertained them warmly, but his gaze remained on Lin Li as he spoke. Only when everyone took a seat did the old man start speaking again. If I'm not wrong, Mage Felik, you joined the House of Anduin half a year ago, and through Anduin, you joined Jerosis Guild of Magic. Oh, right. At the first level certification, you maintained magic for 28 minutes, didn't you? Impressive. I've lived to this age, but I've yet to see any other mage capable of this feat. Lin Li sat quietly as he listened closely, however, his mind was nothing like his calm exterior. Honestly speaking, a feeling of unrest was brewing in his mind. Not even in his dreams did he think that anyone would know everything about him so well. This was impossible. His ability to maintain his magic output for 28 minutes had been classified as a secret by Jirian, and not even the Supreme Council had any idea of it, so how did this Basel get to know of it? As for his joining of the House of Anduin, that was even more unbelievable. This was his biggest secret, and nobody else besides Anduin knew of it. Anduin would never tell anyone of it for fun, of course, neither would Lin Li do it himself. The problem was, if nobody had let this secret out, where did this Basel hear it from? Surely divination did not exist in this world. Haha, it seems Mr. Basel knows me very well. Even though Lin Li was smiling, his smile looked very stiff. It felt as though he had caught someone staring at him as he showered. Right now, Lin Li felt very exposed. However, the peeping Tom who sat in the bamboo chair did not look the least bit apologetic. Haha, that was too much of a compliment, Mage Felik. I only know these trivial things. Mr. Basel, you're too humble. Lin Li smiled stiffly as he scolded him in his mind. Trivial things? You know too much for it to be trivial. No, I'm not being humble. There are many things I do not understand. For example, how did you become a level 16 archmage even though you did not know a single thing about magic just half a year ago? For example, how were you able to master both pharmacology and smithing? To be honest, Mage Felik, I think you're full of secrets, and the more I know, the less I think I do. Norfeller and Duke sat quiet and unmoving like a couple of statues. Of course, Norfeller showed no reaction. As a high-ranking vampire, he was indifferent to everything unless it threatened the one he made a blood oath to. As for Duke, it was because he was dumbfounded. Joining the House of Anduin? Maintaining magic output for 28 minutes? While Duke did not understand any of those, he did hear level 16 archmage very clearly. Hell, level 16 archmage? Even the most powerful archmage in Dulin's Castellan mansion might not beat that. Duke had never thought he would have such luck. He was not even looking, but ended up pickpocketing a level 16 archmage. As he thought back to what happened then and that terrifying skit, Duke felt himself break out in cold sweat. Thank God I was smart and didn't do anything stupid. If not, I would have died at least 10 times by now. Frankly speaking, I'm taken aback. Lin Li brushed his nose as he smiled awkwardly. But, Mr. Basel, I'm sure you didn't invite me over just to scare me? Haha, I hope you don't misunderstand me, Mage Felik. I only said that to show my sincerity. As you can see, I am nothing more than an old man, and have nothing against you. I invited you over today to discuss a good deal. Oh? I wonder what kind of deal you are referring to, Mr. Basel? No hurry, Mage Felik, I'll tell you the details later. First, however, if I may ask, is it true that the Supreme Council appointed you the president of Breezy Plains Guild of Magic a month ago? Yes, that is true, but as you can see, I've just arrived in the Breezy Plains, and haven't had the chance to start on anything. Besides a newly built tower and some less than friendly acquaintances, I haven't got anything. If you were looking to make a deal in this area, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. No. The old man shook his head, and continued speaking in a slow and mild manner. Mage Felik, I think you've misunderstood me. While my deal is related to you being the president of Breezy Plains Guild of Magic, it's somewhat different from what you're thinking of. Frankly speaking, I want to ask if you'll need some manpower after the tower has been built. Manpower? Lin Li's eyes lit up at the mention of that. You're saying that you can provide the Guild of Magic with military support of some sort? It was no wonder that Lin Li was so worked up. Military strength was of utmost importance to the Guild of Magic now. He had no choice. The power dynamic of the breezy plains was incredibly complicated, and nobody knew when something might happen. Just like what Lin Li had said earlier, besides a barely finished tower, all he was left with were a few acquaintances he was not even on good terms with. If he were to get in trouble, Norfeller would not be sufficient, hence, he needed a strong army. Only then could he guarantee himself peaceful days in the breezy plains. And because of this, Lin Li had been earnestly making more money these days. How else would this lazy fellow be willing to sweat buckets in a forge otherwise? Even when he was in Gerosis, Lin Li knew that the world was mercenary. Why would anybody work for him if he wasn't wealthy? Basil's suggestion was very attractive to Lin Li indeed. The group sitting in Doolin's library was as good as a guild of magic, only, its structure was more lax. The power of knowledge brought together all of Doolin's mages, and made them somewhat compliant to Basil, who owned the library. If Basil was willing, he could definitely gather many powerful mages for Lin Li. Lin Li gritted his teeth, and said, "Tell me your terms." "Haha, my terms are very simple," the old man smiled as he stood up from the bamboo chair for the first time. "Save me a spot in the Guild of Magic." "Huh?" Lin Li was stunned. Long before he spoke, Lin Li had already considered what terms Basil would lay out, yet he never would have thought that what Basil wanted was a spot in the Guild of Magic. What kind of terms are these? Even Lin Li was unable to tell how powerful Basil was, which meant that he could probably be at the legendary level. A mage of a legendary level asking to join the Guild of Magic, at the same time promising to gather him a group of decent mages. This was as good as a newly orphaned beauty with a large inheritance crying for your hand in marriage and offering to find you a harem of concubines. Wasn't this what they called free lunch? While there were many guilds of magic in the Felon Kingdom, only Alana's Guild of Magic was helmed by a true legendary mage. Having stayed there for a couple of months, Lin Li was well aware that this legendary mage, Aldwin, was the real reason they were able to maintain their position in Felon's capital, seeing as they were only mediocre in their capabilities. Aldwin has rarely intervened personally in the past decade. The only time he had done so was to fight the Sword Sage of the Storm for the map of the High Lord's mausoleum. Even then, nobody dared to belittle him. Lin Li recalled his fight with Matthias. Even though the Marathon family basically controlled the whole of Alana, they did not dare deal with him openly, as Aldwin had said before that anybody who dared find trouble with the young mage was provoking the Guild of Magic. Provoking the Guild of Magic was equivalent to challenging Aldwin's authority, and even the powerful Marathon family was not prepared to deal with the rage of a legendary mage. Strength, how straightforward and effective it was at times. So long as one held enough power, they would not even have to do anything, as anyone who harbored ill will for them would be sufficiently deterred with just a few words. The strength of a legendary mage would be especially amplified in a place like the Breezy Plains Guild of Magic. It was newly established, and much too weak to withstand the attack of any decent force. If a legendary mage were to join them now, it would buy Lin Li some precious time for him to build up the Guild of Magic. The surprise had come so suddenly that it was almost unbelievable, which made Lin Li doubt his ears. Surely free lunch like this did not exist? Soon, however, Lin Li calmed down. Lin Li had to repeatedly remind himself to be cautious against this heaven-sent offer, as a free lunch simply meant he would have to pay for it in another way. Granted, he couldn't wish for anything more than to have a legendary mage on board, but what would come after that? There had to be a reason behind everything, even if it seemed like nothing more than a convenient coincidence. To have a legendary mage join them? Not bad, it'd call for a celebration indeed, but the first thought that came into Lin Li's mind was, why? Of course, I have my reasons. Mr. Basil, that was hardly convincing at all. Listen to me, Mage Felic. The old man cut him off somewhat rudely, and slowly stood up from his bamboo chair, an unusually stoical expression on his wrinkly face. I assure you I have no ill intentions. It is true that I have my own reason for wanting to join the Guild of Magic. While this reason does not negatively affect you, I cannot tell you no about it for the time being. Basil paused for a moment. Perhaps to make himself sound all the more convincing, he sincerely added, but I guarantee that I'll tell you the real reason when the time is right. Well, Mr. Basil, I'd like to know when will the time be right? In 3 months. No, Mr. Basil, 3 months is too long a time. There's no saying if anything I have no control over will happen in this time. I hope you understand this, as I have to answer to the members of the guild, the Supreme Council, and to myself. Alright, 2 months, then. However, Mage Felix, this is my last offer, and if you cannot wait this little bit of time, I'm afraid that'll be the end of our deal. The legendary mage and the archmage haggled like a couple of street hawkers. After arduous negotiations, they finally settled on a month. After that, Lin Li stared at Basil for a good 10 minutes, before he suddenly smiled warmly. Welcome on board, Mr. Basil. My pleasure. The old man sat quietly and did not look the least bit surprised, as though it was as he'd predicted. Right, Mr. Basil. I wonder what position you'll like in the Guild of Magic. Honestly, with your status as a legendary mage, you can definitely be the president, but that'll be tricky as this was decided by the Supreme Council. If I were to transfer this position to you, it may take a long time for the Supreme Council to agree. I should be able to call the shots for any other position, though. The position of the president is a pretty humorous idea. I've never thought about wanting that position, but since President trusts this old man so much, I cannot stand on ceremony with you. If it's possible, I want the position of the head referee. The head referee? Lin Li paused. It was a very important position in the Guild of Magic, and its authority was comparable to that of the president. They could handle any matter that concerned the safety of the guild, and their authority sometimes surpassed that of the president. A head referee was to some extent another president in the Guild of Magic. Perhaps for this reason, the position of the head referee was empty in most guilds of magic, or the president occupied both positions. Take Alana's Guild of Magic for example. Even with Macklin's influence and power, he was not appointed the head referee. As for Jerosa's Guild of Magic, Jirian himself was the head referee. Anything that provoked him was treated as a threat to the guild's safety, and he was perfectly capable of leading a group of mages to eliminate it. However, Basil's request was not seen unkindly by Lin Li, who secretly heaved a sigh of relief instead. Basil was a true legendary mage. With his power, it would have been perfectly reasonable for him to ask for the position of the president. Lin Li was not worried that he would ask for an important position, quite the contrary, the more important the position Basil asked for, the better. It would only be an issue if he asked for an unimportant one. Since the head referee was such an important position, they would have to notify the Supreme Council of it, and they could have the Supreme Council send a few people to examine the issue as well. Anyway, the most important thing was to blow this matter out of proportion so that everyone knew of it. Then it'd be great for Lin Li. Stand me up? No problem, the Supreme Council will take care of you. Set a trap for me? Not an issue either, the Supreme Council will take care of that too. With the Supreme Council backing him, Lin Li would be more than a mere president of a guild of magic. He would represent the authority of the Supreme Council, and anybody who dared go against him would be directly challenging the Supreme Council's authority. Would the sick elders holding unimaginable power let you go easily? Haha, I'm sure you'll be well assured after this, right, President Felix? The old man looked at Lin Li with a half-smile. Clearly, Basil was well aware what being the head referee entailed, and he did so to prove his sincerity. By tying himself to the Guild of Magic, he would avoid creating any issues when the pair worked together. Lin Li was apparently a fan of such a solution too. Of course, Lin Li would never admit this. Once he got what he wanted, he immediately put on a smile. Ha ha ha, Mr. Basil, you're pretty humorous too, what would I be worried about? You're a well-respected man of impeccable morals. It is the honor of the Guild of Magic of Breezy Plains to have you on board as well as my honor as a junior. Head referee aside, if you wanted the position of the president, I'd give it to you in a heartbeat. After serving up a flurry of flattery, Lin Li changed the topic suddenly. Right, Mr. Basil, when do you intend to announce this to the mages in the library? As you know, government organizations like the Supreme Council like to take their time, and if I don't notify them of your new appointment as soon as possible, I've no idea when they'll send your letter of appointment over. No matter how refined his manners were, Basil could not help feeling baffled by this blatant lie. Thankfully, Basil had had more time to cultivate his manners than most of the young, and only frowned slightly before he relaxed again. Why the rush, my president? I'd like to discuss something else with you before you announce this news. Something else? Yes, about the kidnapping of Roland's castellan. Oh? I wonder what do you think of this, Mr. Basil? Lin Li lit up at this. Recall that the map of Dragon Mountains had been given to him by this old man. He had to have a good understanding of the bandits of the Dragon Mountains. Lin Li had originally come today to find out more from him and had been worried about not having a chance to bring it up. To think that Basil would bring it up first. I do have some ideas about this. As they returned to their initial topic, the old man slowly regained the wise demeanor of an elder. He drank his tea leisurely as he spoke in a mild and slow manner. If I'm not wrong, the people who kidnapped the castellan's son were the Sire bandits. Lin Li pursed his lips secretly as he thought, what a nonsense. Everyone in the breezy plains knows that the ones who kidnapped the poor kid of the castellan's family were the Sire bandits. They are the survivors of the epidemic in Sire Town, and have a leader called Vanscore. Haha, I'm sure you're secretly scolding me for spouting nonsense. Lin Li almost bit his tongue as he stared at Basil, both in shock and suspicion. He had so many questions. Surely this old man isn't capable of mind reading? How come he knows what I'm thinking? Don't worry, President Felix. I'm not able to read your mind, and even I know that what I just said was nonsense. The old man smiled as he looked satisfied with himself. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm afraid not many know that the Dragon Mountains are not the real hiding spot of Vanscore. Huh? Lin Li was stunned when he heard this. It's not the Dragon Mountains? Then where would it be? A place you wouldn't think of. My dear head referee, can we not go around in circles? What do you mean a place I wouldn't think of? Don't tell me Vanscore is hiding in the ruins of Sire Town. Lin Li suddenly froze at this, and after a minute, he carefully gulped and said, that can't be it, right? It is. Basil smiled and nodded his head as though he hadn't just seen President's blank expression, and carried on speaking. Roland City has been increasingly hard on the Sire bandits for the past few decades, and even had the Sky Knights from Alana thoroughly search the Dragon Mountains once. However, they haven't found anything besides a few low-ranking men. Not a single core member of Sire bandits has been found. My dear President, do you know why that was the case? This must be because Vanscore has got many spies in Roland City. Lin Li shook his head as he spoke. No, not spies. No matter how powerful Vanscore's spies were, they couldn't have made it into the Sky Knights. So many searches, yet they haven't caught a single core member. That must mean that the Sire bandits were able to escape quickly enough each time. So, Sir Head Referee, you're saying that there must be a special way they use to escape, something like a secret passage. Yes, one that leads to the ruins of Sire Town. I understand. Lin Li nodded his head as he was really enlightened this time. No wonder the Sire bandits had been so bold as to kidnap the son of Roland City's castellan. Who else would dare do this? Even if they were stronger than the Sire bandits, surely they would find it difficult to go against Roland City's army? Moreover, the Salas family that ruled Roland City was an important noble family in the Felon Kingdom, and held power in Alana as well as the Breezy Plains. They had also been on good terms with nobles like that Marathon family, and who knew what would happen if the nobles joined forces? Only the Sire bandits would be brave enough to this. They were not in the least bit afraid of Roland City's castellan, because if he wanted to completely uproot their organization, surely he would have to find their base first. If not for Basil's hint, Lin Li would never have thought that their real hiding spot was in the long-destroyed Sire Town. But how did Basil know this? Basil only gave a vague reply to Lin Li's question. I have my ways. Lin Li rolled his eyes at that. Damn it, this old con man. That said, Lin Li was in a pretty good mood as they had accomplished more than what he'd expected to during this visit to the library. They now knew where the Sire bandits were really hiding, and they also got a legendary mage and some other decent ones on board too. While he was unsure where the loyalty of the legendary mage lay, he was quite sure of the other mages joining them. If it all went according to plan, they would be the pioneer core members of the Breezy Plains Guild of Magic. He was confident that even if Basil decided to change his mind in the future, the other mages would still follow him loyally. Who else besides him could provide these mages with state-of-the-art magical equipment, an endless supply of medicine, as well as a chance to learn advanced magic? Enril was materialistic like that. Anyone willing to pay the highest price would have the most followers, and even if Basil was highly respected by the mages, he would surely be no match for Lin Li with what the latter could provide them with. Each of the three aforementioned points was more than enough to tempt any mage, and if he was willing to spend money, it was only a matter of time before he won them over. But, Mr. President, there is something I have to remind you about. There is something strange about Sire Town, so you must be careful if you're going there. Lin Li paused. What's strange? I'm not sure about that. I've been there a few years ago, and noticed that the magical wave there is somewhat different from other places. I haven't gone to investigate what's different, though. No choice, I'm a feeble old man, and not as hardy as you youngsters. Lin Li couldn't hold back from rolling his eyes when he heard the old man pretend to be weak. Damn it, you're a legendary mage. If you say you're not hardy, then who is? But never mind, if he doesn't want to say it, there is no use in pressing him. Having asked everything he wanted to know, Lin Li did not wish to stay longer. After a bit of chatting, he left the library with Norfeller and Duke. Norfeller remained emotionless, and followed Lin Li like a shadow. Meanwhile, Duke looked as if he had just encountered something out of the world. He had a glazed expression, and occasionally stared at Lin Li as though Lin Li was a ferocious beast instead of a human while they walked. Duke could not believe that he was walking next to an archmage. Goodness! He had tried to steal an archmage's wallet. However, Lin Li was in a rush, and did not seem to notice Duke staring at all. Time was ticking, and he really wished he had a pair of wings as the week he had promised the dwarf was already half gone. He had originally thought that saving the Castellan's son would only take a day or two, but after hearing what Basil said today, he realized this was not that easy. The bastards of the Sire bandits had conjured up a secret passage between the Dragon Mountains and Sire Town. This joke was getting out of hand. The secret hiding spot of Vanscore for the past decade or so could not possibly be found so easily. Who knew how long it was going to take him this trip? Duke, get a carriage and meet me at the Adventurers Guild. Lin Li led Norfeller down a few streets to the Adventurers Guild after giving instructions to Duke. Sire Town was strange indeed. He was going to have to get some help. Lin Li walked into the Adventurers Guild and went straight to the reception for mission recruitment announcements. Excuse me, I'd like to make a recruitment notice for a mission. Reward will be 30,000 gold coins, and I need at least 3 members. Best if one of them is a bandit, and any adventurer who accepts the mission is at least level 15. Okay, please give me a moment. The receptionist was a young lady in her 20s. She had short, red hair and a delicate doll-like face, making her look exceptionally adorable. As she accepted Lin Li's crystal card, she could not help giving him a glance, surprise evident in her eyes. It was not often that someone announced a mission for 30,000 gold coins, and to think he would be so young too. The young lady retrieved a form from the desk, and asked, "May I know what will the mission be about?" "Searching a deadly area. It'll be highly dangerous and details will be given in person." "All right." The young lady filled up the form for Lin Li, and had him check it before asking someone from the staff to disseminate the information. A reward of 30,000 gold coins was pretty attractive, so Lin Li had only been in the resting room for 5 minutes before footsteps could be heard. It was the lady from before, and there were 3 young adventurers behind her. The 4 walked into the resting room. Lin Li was shocked when he clearly saw the sword hanging on the waist of the warrior in his 20s. It was a familiar sword. A month ago, when Lin Li had just moved to the Breezy Plains, he had forged 4 magical weapons for Kamon to help him as he wanted to earn some money quickly. This sword was one of the 4 weapons. Lin Li remembered that the sword was forged from runes adamantine, and the mana power it held was comparable to that of a true magic shooter. He had also used mana sealing skill during the forging process and repeatedly compressed and purified the mana power. Coupled with 2 alternating mage widths, even Lin Li considered the runes adamantine sword the finest of masterpieces. Right, Come-On had mentioned that the buyer of this sword was a guy named Jason. It seemed that this guy was the level 15 warrior, Jason, that Come-On had been referring to. Not bad, it would make the trip to Sire Town's ruins much safer if he had this level 15 warrior come along. Mr. Felix, many adventurers are interested in the mission you have just announced and want to know more details. Alright, thanks for the trouble. After a simple introduction, the red-haired girl retreated and left the resting room to Lin Li and the 3 adventurers. Hello Mr. Felix, I'm Jason. Jason's self-introduction was short, unlike those of the other adventurers, as he did not even mention his occupation. It was not necessary to him, as he stood at the top of all adventurers in Duland, and the name Jason alone was a brand of guarantee. Hence, levels and occupations were meaningless to him. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Jason. They're my companions, Weather, a bandit, and Rosha, a priest. Oh, right, Mr. Felix, I heard Ms. Panny say you need a level 15 bandit? Yes. Weather is a level 15 bandit, and is the most outstanding bandit amongst all the adventurers in Duland. He has accomplished many difficult missions alone, and is considered an authoritative figure in the areas of searching and infiltration. Weather also contributed to creating more than half of the map that most adventurers in Duland use. That's great, Lin Li nodded as his gaze fell upon the bandit named Weather. He had to admit that this guy did look like a bandit. In Jirian's words, the most important trait a bandit should have was to look sly, and this Weather guy was a born natural, with short stocky figure and beady eyes. He made people hold on to their wallets unknowingly. As for Priest Rosha, she comes from the Brilliant Shrine in Leaden Kingdom. Oh? Lin Li paused when he heard the name Brilliant Shrine. Everybody knew that the Felon Kingdom was a true kingdom of magic, and few people worked in shrines. Even the prosperous capital Alana only had a single lonely church. Lin Li had been in Amril for about half a year, yet the only person he knew who was involved in holy work was the Archbishop Unlos, who was also well-versed in pharmacy. Lin Li had not thought that this dainty blonde beauty would turn out to be a level 15 priest. Not bad, a level 15 warrior, a level 15 bandit, and a level 15 priest. It was a pretty strong team, and should be more than enough to deal with what they might find in the rubble of Sire Town. Very well, Mr. Jason, this mission is yours. It all became easier once the 3 had been given their due recognition. Lin Li gave them a simple introduction of the mission, including the objective and possible hazards, as well as division of loot and rewards. Lin Li had been pretty generous with the terms and rewards, and Jason agreed easily. Hence, the entire negotiation had only taken half an hour. Lin Li was unusually easygoing, and paid them a 10,000 gold coins deposit immediately after an agreement was made. When the 5 emerged from the Adventurers Guild, Duke had already been waiting for some time on the carriage at the entrance. It took about half a day to reach Roland City from Duland. As they were pressed for time, they left in the afternoon, and only reached Roland City around the evening. Roland City was completely different from the wretched Duland. It was prosperous and had abundant resources. Large fields and orchards could be seen nearby, and painted a picture of happiness. When they reached the perimeters of Roland City, the bandit Weather suggested that they go through the Dragon Mountains, which he said was the quickest way to the ruins of Sire Town. After passing through the Dragon Mountains, they would reach Sire Town in about an hour, and since he was the best at this, Lin Li naturally agreed with him. Hence, the 6 of them left the carriage at the foot of a mountain, and hiked up a rugged mountain path that evening. Few people dared to enter the Dragon Mountains due to the presence of the Sire bandits. Hence, the land around here slowly became filled with wilderness. It was an arduous journey for them as the winding paths were difficult to follow and beasts appeared at times too. This was where Jason and the rest came in useful. Quite honestly, the magical beasts they met were not too weak. There was a level 14 velociraptor, a level 15 scare tiger, And a level 15 evil eye had also appeared suddenly when they were halfway up the mountain. However, they were all no match for Jason and the rest, and even the strongest of them, the evil eye, had lasted only 10 minutes before it fell under Jason's rune's adamantine sword. Lin Li had to admit that Jason's position amongst adventurers was well earned, as the ability he had showcased in these fights was well above what an average warrior was capable of. Every attack and defense were birthed from life and death combat, and while they might not seem like much, they always served him unexpectedly well in fights. Even Lin Li was secretly in awe. His other two companions were amazing as well. Weather was very different in his way of fighting, it was unbelievably despicable, and his strikes were never lethal. He always made the ferocious magical beasts suffer by slicing their stomach or poisoning their eyes. Every time, he would escape unscathed, and left the magical beasts frustrated with him. Rosha's magic played its part as well. The dainty beauty was a typical combat priest, and her magic was targeted at strengthening while minimizing pain. Coupled with a heavenly attack, she held an important role in the fight. If not for her, Jason and Weather might have fallen prey to the claws of the magical beasts, no matter how good they were. Since he had spent 30,000 gold coins to hire them, Lin Li happily stood at the sidelines as he never once intervened even though they had encountered over a dozen magical beasts. The only thing he had done was to wave the flag and shout. While the rest did not view this highly, they could not do anything to him, as he had already paid them. Money was power these days, and for someone to spend 30,000 gold coins to hire people, they would have to accept it even if he messed up occasionally, much less expect him to help. Their journey carried on just like that. They spent almost half the night to get from the foot of the mountain to the midpoint. As they were about to enter a forest, Jason stopped. "Mr. Fellick, it's dark, and if we were to enter the forest now, we may run into some danger. Should we rest for the night?" The terrain in the Dragon Mountains was complicated, and it had all kinds of magical beasts as well. Coupled with the fact that this was where the boss of the Sire bandits hid, it would be incredibly dangerous for them to continue at night. They were lucky to have arrived this far. No matter how brave Jason was, he did not dare to continue now. Too bad he'd met such an employer. Lin Li was utterly useless in Jason's opinion. This fellow and his servant did not help at all in the dozen or so fights they had been in. Besides cheering them on now and then, they had not done a single thing. It was no child's play to bring an employer like that on this journey. If they ran into danger at night, it would be one thing to lose the 30,000 gold coins, but he might also lose his life. Wouldn't that be too high a price to pay? Hence, Jason refused to continue on into the forest. Since Jason was not willing to do so, Lin Li could only nod his head and agree. "All right, we'll do as you say." Then, the 6 of them set up a few tents and lit a fire. Nights in the Dragon Mountains were cold and quiet. Lin Li sat in his own tent, wrapped in thick blankets as he started his daily meditation. The way Lin Li meditated was different from other mages. No one would believe that this archmage who had already broken to level 16 would be like a mage apprentice, still drilling on the fundamental magical practices. He was very consistent in doing so, and never broke his routine. He knew that that was the only way he could patch his weakness up. That was right. Although he seemed to have perfected his mental strength and magical ability, and was thus envied by many, Lin Li knew that he had an extremely weak foundation. Other mages who had similar abilities as him had either grown up in a magic-oriented culture, or had the coaching from esteemed mentors since a young age. To Lin Li, however, learning magic was like a midlife career change. Despite being exposed to magic only when he was reaching the age of 20, he took merely half a year to rise to where he was now. His powers had been increasing exponentially as he journeyed through the Sunset Mountains and then to the breezy plains, where he soared from a rookie who knew nothing to a powerful level 16 archmage. The reason behind his growth was not just his little bit of talent, but more so the luck that helped him along the way. This was the fact that struck Lin Li after he sat down to think about it properly. His luck had been really great. A lot of mages would take their whole lives to grow from a level 1 mage apprentice to a level 16 archmage. He, however, only used half a year to achieve all these. The rapid growth would naturally bring much weakness to his foundation. At the start, such weakness would not be significant. Yet, it would be too late to regret if it were to haunt him in the future. Actually, Anduin had seen this problem after the gathering at the Pharmacists' Guild. But, being a legendary mage, he thought of a way to patch things up by throwing him into Cinder Woods. He made use of the special environment and the need to partake in strenuous battles there to reinforce Lin Li's shaky foundation. Lin Li did not even realize that he was in a grave situation then. It wasn't until the recent month that Lin Li made some time to contemplate and had the chance to understand the core magical mantras better. He gradually realized that his situation was not as optimistic as it seemed. Yes, he was indeed powerful now, even mightier than Macklin. But, without much technical knowledge on magic, as well as with the lack of experience in a comprehensive set of magical practice, the mana within him was like a time bomb which might explode at any moment. That it had not exploded yet was due to his huge mental strength. With that, he was able to balance out the violent mana inside him. However, when that balance was broken one day, it would mean terrible trouble. Once the mental strength failed to repress the violent mana, it would be a devastating issue to any mage, especially Lin Li, a man with unlimited mana. It would be particularly destructive if the tragedy were to land on him. He would lose everything, even his spiritual brand. But, the good thing was that it was not too late for him. Such consistent practice might seem really boring, but it was the only way through. Taking these baby steps, polishing the rough edges and building up the magic system within him, would bring about a huge improvement to his ability as well. Lin Li believed that he was not far from that day. He could faintly feel that the unsettled mana was gradually integrating with his body. "Mr. Fellick, may I come in?" After finishing the last mana practice, he heard Jason's footsteps outside his tent. Lin Li could not help but feel surprised. Why wasn't Jason asleep at such an ungodly hour? Lin Li ended his meditation doubtfully. Sure. The man who came in was indeed Jason. There was an apologetic expression on the face of this top adventurer of Duland. "Mr. Fellick, hope I didn't disturb your rest," asked Jason. "It does not matter. I don't have a habit of sleeping early, either. But, Mr. Jason, what brings you here?" It's nothing much. I just couldn't fall asleep, so I was wondering if I could have a chat with you," Jason said after looking around Lin Li's tent curiously. "Is that so?" Lin Li pursed his lips. Although the smile on his face did not fade, he had already started to lash out at Jason internally. "God damn it, why would you want to chat at such a timing? Besides, both of us are men, do you think I'm such a casual person? Although I've known you for a while, I realized that I still do not know your occupation," Jason said casually. I'm just asking. You can choose not to tell me if you are uncomfortable with it." "Hee, there's nothing to be uncomfortable about," Lin Li laughed, and did not conceal it from Jason. "I'm a mage." "Oh, you are a mage. Apologies for the rudeness. I'm just an incompetent mage. There's nothing to be proud of." Mage Fellick, you are too humble." Although Jason was complimenting Lin Li, he could not help belittling him. He had been in Duland for many years. How could he not know all the skillful mages who had already gotten the permission to enter Duland's library? Since he had never seen Fellick there, Fellick had to be a really incompetent mage. If it had been before, Jason would not have minded Lin Li's competency. As long as he would not prevent him from attaining wealth, it would not matter if he was a cripple. Yet, the problem now was that Lin Li had promised a task that was worth 300,000 gold coins, and it entailed ensuring Lin Li's safety. What was the most scary thing in this sort of mission? The employer. Those that did not have any ability but were determined to travel to dangerous places. These people dared to go everywhere with the thought that they had the protection from adventurers. In the end, not to mention that they would lose their lives in the process, they would implicate the adventurers too. Jason was not worried about the safety of them three, though. Since they were all level 15 adventurers, they would always have the means of ensuring their personal safety. However, if this useless mage were to lose his life, whom should he find to claim the remaining 20,000 gold coins? Just when Jason was having a splitting headache over this issue, they heard footsteps outside the tent. "Come out, Jason. I think there's something there." That voice belonged to Bandit Weather. Lin Li frowned. Since Bandit Weather was in charge of safety tonight, it meant trouble if he were to call Jason at such a timing. The two men went out of their tent in a hurry, and saw Weather running towards them frantically. "Jason, trouble's big. Calm down and tell us slowly." Jason frowned. It was as though he had been used to his teammates' anxiety. "Why you. Listen to me." The bandit took in several deep breaths. "Around half an hour ago, there was an adventuring team that went into that forest in front." Continue. Jason's expression turned into that of concern. Why would there be an adventuring team in a place like the Dragon Mountains, which humans would not usually visit? Weather swallowed his saliva. Then, I think they had provoked an ice howler. **T. Jason cursed. To an adventurer, this was a very tricky situation. It was not them who committed any mistake, yet despite having avoided almost all the danger zones, they were still endangered by other reckless adventurers. It was like sitting at home comfortably but getting killed by a meteorite that fell from the sky for no reason, the disaster that landed on them due to others. "What should we do, Weather?" "Should we?" Weather did not continue his speech. But, as he spoke, his gaze had already fluttered to the path back home. He wanted to ask Jason if they should escape now. Jason hesitated. Lin Li laughed to himself. What a joke Weather was. Ice howlers were level 17 magical beasts that usually lived and slept in caves. Despite being lazy and retarded, they could be really deadly once provoked. If there really was an ice howler in the forest, where would they be able to escape to? Unless they had the ability to teleport, they would still be found by the determined ice howler. Furthermore, it was more dangerous to run off in the Dragon Mountains at such a dark night as compared to battling an ice howler. No one knew what other things were hiding in the dark. "No, Weather. Let's get ready for battle." It was fortunate that Jason did not waste time hesitating. He knew that it was obviously unwise to escape in such conditions. There were too many lurking dangers in the night in the Dragon Mountains. These dangers would overweight the danger brought about by a single agitated ice howler. "Oh, Mage Velik. We might not be able to help you much in the battle later." "So. Yeah, I understand. Don't worry, I will take care of myself." "All right then, Mr. Velik. Please be careful. If something's not right, you can go find a place to hide." In fact, Jason would not want to arrange it like this if he could. However, this fella had become a burden now, knowing him itself had become bad luck. But, for that 20,000 gold coins, he could not let him die just yet. If he got into danger, whom should they claim the money from? If it were before, such a burden would not matter to them, as they all had level 15 ability. Yet, the situation was grave tonight. How did they even provoke the ice howler? That was a level 17 magical beast. They could try to avoid it on normal days, but now, they had to drag a burden along and start a battle. "Okay, I know," Lin Li replied and nodded. After he went back to his tent, he tidied up his things. Since the ice howler had appeared, this place was naturally not safe. He had brought along many scrolls, formulas, and maps, among many others. It would not be nice if those were to get damaged. After doing that, Lin Li went back to the campfire. At this time, the growls of the ice howler were much louder. The dense forest trembled, and groups of wild animals scurried in fear. In face of such danger, lions and tigers would have to escape too. Jason gripped the rune's adamantine sword tightly and fixed his gaze on the dense forest. Weather had smeared a toxic substance on the blade of his dagger, and was crouching on the ground in the darkness. Rosha had begun to recite some prayers. The melodious voice of the blonde beauty was quite penetrative, and echoed throughout the Dragon Mountains like an euphonious piece of music. At the same time, Jason's rune's adamantine sword glowed even more radiant. As compared to the performance of the three adventurers, the employer's action was really embarrassing. While the adventurers had already begun their preparations to defend themselves from the beast, the employer just started to take out his staff lazily and recite a spell slowly. It took him around 20 seconds to call out that spell, which no one recognized. What the hell is he doing? The sudden magical wave caused much frustration in Jason. It was definitely his worst luck throughout his time being an adventurer to have met such an employer. How could he use such a long time to cast a spell that had no particular effect? Jason was confident that a scroll would be more useful than Lin Li's recitation. Alright, he would just take it that his employer was a rich man. How would an archmage or legendary mage even need to hire bodyguards? Yet, since he was an incompetent employer, all the more he should not interfere in the battle so recklessly. That is a freaking level 17 ice howler. My god. Do you think all creatures with 4 hooves are herbivores? Liars, you liars. Just when Jason was feeling vexed with Lin Li's nosy action, he heard somebody crying at the edge of the dense forest. What is it now? Lin Li was surprised, and looked towards the sound source. He saw 20 to 30 adventurers dashing out of the thick forest anxiously. While they escaped, they kept looking back in fear. It was as though the ice howler had wings and had the ability to swoop behind their backs immediately. There was a young lady aged around 19 staggering among this group of adventurers. Her linen-colored hair had been ruffled up messily by the wind, and her elegant dress had been torn by tree branches. She held the hem of the dress while running behind the group. You guys said you could deal with any magical beast. You liars. The group of adventurers was very patient with her. Those who were bolder took some time to explain to her that the ice howler was too powerful for them to challenge it. Those who were more timid, however, chose to ignore her whining and focus on escaping themselves. Miss Yvonne, I think you'd better run. This ice howler is too mighty. We wouldn't be able to defeat it. That was a middle-aged adventurer, the only person who cared to stop in his tracks to attend to her. But you had promised. Little miss, please. That was just marketing tactics. Any adventurer team would promise the same thing. Did you really think that we could defeat a level 17 magical beast? If we are that great, we would have been hired by your father at your house as VIPs. How would we be here to risk our lives in the Dragon Mountains? What about my little brother? Your brother, the speech of the middle-aged man, got interrupted by an enraged growl. That ear-piercing sound caused his expression to change. Quick, run. What followed was white mist that spread like a plague. At once, a bone-chilling sensation could be felt. It was as though they had dropped into an ice house during a cold winter. Thanks to his fast reaction time, they escaped the fate of being buried in the snow. The white mist swallowed the forest in an instant and turned the trees into crystallite ice sculptures, and the white and furry ice howler made a grand appearance as it trampled its way out of the forest. It was 10 meters tall, and had a body that resembled a hill. The ice howler was definitely a behemoth as compared to other magical beasts. The hideous pair of horns on its head was like a pair of bayonets that crushed everything that blocked its way. Be careful. Jason gripped the sword made from the rune's adamantine. Although he was one of the best adventurers of Duland, his eyes were filled with trepidation when he looked at that gigantic existence. The raging ice howler was like a streak of lightning that caught up with the 2 adventurers that were lagging behind. In a split second, the 2 bayonet-like horns penetrated the unfortunate adventurers. Their blood spilled on the ground, and made the ice howler go into frenzy. It created more bone-chilling mist, while its 2 unruly horns worked their way towards the group of adventurers. 2 other adventurers fell. Fuck, stop it. That was a young man aged around 20 years old. He was shouting with all his might. He had to be the leader of the group of adventurers, for the rest of the adventurers finally made 1 or 2 decent counterattacks under his guidance. However, the difference in abilities was fated to be a hindrance to their battle. In the group of 30, the mightier ones were only at level 13 or level 14, and the weaker ones were not even level 10. Their attacks were as insignificant as scratching the itch to a level 17 magical beast. The archer's continuous volleys of arrows could not penetrate the fur of the beast at all, while the warriors and the bandits did not even have the courage to launch any attacks against it. The ice howler was like a meat grinder that could turn any living thing into minced meat in the blink of the eye. 10 adventurers would not be enough to become a dish of that beast. Despite recitating desperately, the spells that the 3 mages unleashed on the ice howler was like a joke. With it having a natural resistance to magic, spells that were lower than level 15 were insignificant to it. Only spells at the level of an archmage and beyond would have a real opportunity to threaten its life. Jason frowned, and held the rune's adamantine sword in his hands even tighter. The situation was clear. If no one were to step in to help, the entire adventurer team would perish here. Let's go. Jason had no choice. It was impossible for the 3 of them to fight an ice howler. In order to survive this battle, they had to work together with this team of troublemakers. Although they were detestable, now was not the time to settle the score. They had to first get rid of this terrible beast. After Jason spoke, Weather took his dagger and snuck into the darkness, while Rosha hastened her recitation and released the energy-enhancing theurgy onto her teammates. The strong rush of divine power was like the tidal waves. Jason's rune's adamantine sword also generated a blazing wave of combat energy. At the same time, Lin Li had completed his second spell. After that, he patted the dust on his long robe and called Norfeller over. Norfeller, I will leave the rest to you. All right, master. The high-ranking vampire nodded. He pulled on his black hood and transformed into a ball of black mist. The interference from Jason's team improved the one-sided battle. The powers of a level 15 warrior was great. What made it incisive was the help rendered by a high-ranking priest behind him. It was as though Jason managed to take on the invincible ice howler by himself. With the help of the theurgy from the high-ranking priest, Jason's combat potential was maximized. It looked like a one-man show after that. The combat energy, given off by his rune's adamantine sword, instantly changed the situation on the field. While Jason helped to battle the ice howler, the young leader used the opportunity to redirect the team. Under his leadership, the attack launched by the archers were not as blind as before. All of their attacks were targeted at the eyes and other critical regions of the ice howler. It gave time for the 3 mages to take a breather and replenish their drained mana. Seeing that things were going in a good direction, the charismatic young man shouted, "Everyone keep going. Let's get rid of this white-haired monster." Lin Li, who had been enjoying the scene at the side, felt cold sweat trickle down his forehead. How could these few people think they can kill an ice howler with just their fingers? These people really don't know what the word death looks like. How can the ice howler die as you hope it to? If not for the timely help rendered by Jason and his team, the horns of the ice howler would have made all of you into skewers already. Furthermore, Jason and his team might not be able to last long. Almost everyone saw hope for the first time since they joined the battle. At this time, Lin Li might be the only person who knew that it was just a superficial and short-lived achievement. The change in tide brought about by Jason and his teammates was not meant to last. Although the situation looked optimistic on their side, it would not take them more than 5 minutes to be defeated by the ice howler. Of course, if everything were to go smoothly, the ice howler should not be able to live after 5 minutes. Lin Li took a glimpse of the battle scene. While the wrestle between Jason and the ice howler continued, Norfeller, who had transformed into a ball of black smoke, took his position in the air quietly. As the bloody battle went on, a thin sense of magical wave crept towards the ice howler. With it being sly and discreet, no one was able to notice its presence at all. Jason might be the only person who would have the ability to perceive the sense of magical wave. Since he was a level 15 warrior, he should be far more observant than other people. As long as he calmed down, he should be able to discover it. However, how would Jason have the time to care about it? Like what Lin Li had expected, the presence of a high-ranking priest was not able to cover the difference between Jason and the ice howler. One eternal frost was all it took to crush that superficial sense of imminent victory. The difference in physical strength could be alleviated by Rosha's theurgy. However, the natural power of the ice howler was not what Theurges could overcome. A bone-chilling sensation could be felt as the ice howler growled. Then, Jason realized that something was not right. He felt a sudden fall in the surrounding temperature, and then saw a thick layer of ice growing under his feet like a stalk of crystal flower blooming there. But, it happened too quickly. Before he could react, the ice had already spread to his whole body. Jason could only watch the ice howler wave its sharp claws. Palm. At that instant, Jason thought that all of the bones in his body had been crushed. The strength of the deadly claws was absolutely beyond human tolerance. To think of it, being attacked by a 10 meters tall object, a metal wall would have been cut through by that claw, so how could a human body withstand that? Everyone saw Jason fly off into the air with a loud noise and drop down like a kite with broken strings. Fresh blood flowed out profusely and dyed the ground red. Jason lay on the ground weakly. His face was ashen and he breathed with difficulty, like an old and ailing man. A blood-red glow was glistening violently. That was the sacrificial blessing, a unique theurgy that only high-ranking priests commanded. It was a glow that would ensure protection of its target after being injured. Unless it was the mind or the soul that was damaged, the protected people would be able to survive any other fatal attacks with the sacrificial blessing. In reality, it was this sacrificial blessing that saved Jason's life. If not for Rosha's fast response, to cast an instantaneous sacrificial blessing before the claw touched him, Jason would have lost all of his lives, if he had more than one. However, the sacrificial blessing was a level 15 theurgy, and the most it could do was to protect Jason's life. It was impossible for him to recover his ability to continue fighting in such a short period of time. The only thing Rosha could do was to keep reciting the holy light prayers and use that dimmed blood-red light to heal Jason, who was badly injured. Instantly, the change in tide rendered the hopeful adventurers helpless. Now that Jason, the only man who had the ability to challenge the ice howler, was down, they could only battle that terrible beast by themselves. Oh, freak! The young leader stood there in a daze as he looked at Jason, who was lying lifelessly on the ground while the ice howler stomped towards him. At this time, he even felt like dying. Wasn't everything going well just now? How did it become like this? Unfortunately, no one could answer him now. The second growl resounded. There was another eternal frost unleashed onto the crowd. To the frantic adventurers, that pure white snow was like the reaper's funeral bell. There were shrieks and calls for help among all the clamor, and the group of people who had just regained their confidence in the battle started to escape from that terrifying snow. However, how could they even escape an attack cast by a level 17 magical beast? When the crystal flower bloomed, it was like multiple waves that crashed onto the shore for as far as 10 meters. Almost all of the adventurers got buried deep under the snow. They could only keep on screaming as they watched the ice crawl all over their body. Damn, at this time almost all the adventurers felt that they were doomed. Jason's mind buzzed when he saw what was happening. *T. Being one of the top adventurers in Duland, Jason naturally knew that the strongest power of the ice howler was not the eternal frost, but the destructive frost shock. The innate characteristic it inherited from the Wild Age gave it an almighty set of ice element powers. It was said that the frost shock was even more terrifying than the 1,000 miles of ice. It would be especially dangerous if there was a group of enemies caught in it together. The consequences were as heavy as the legendary level. Once it got unleashed, no one from this group of weak adventurers would be able to survive. The growl from the ice howler coming from afar made Jason close his eyes hopelessly. He had already felt a strong, vigorous wave of ice element. Jason knew that it was the sign that the ice howler was going to use the frost shock. Suddenly, time seemed to pass really slowly. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Then, Jason felt that something was amiss. The expected attack had not yet come, but what surrounded him was all shrieks and calls for help from the other adventurers. That's weird. Jason muttered, and looked above him. Then, he saw a dark figure that appeared behind the ice howler discreetly. It did not create huge magical waves or hold any deadly weapon. Instead, it had a pair of arms with long nails. This figure dashed towards the ice howler with its long nails, and blood started to spill everywhere. My gosh! How could that be possible? Jason could not believe his eyes. Did that black figure use mere physical strength to tear the firm skin of that ice howler? That's crazy. Since Jason had a violent exchange with the ice howler just now, he was naturally clearer than any other people how freakish the skin of the monster was. Before that, he had to channel all of his combat energy as he worked his tough rune's adamantine sword to bring the slightest harm to the ice howler. Jason could not fathom how exactly a mere pair of arms could even hurt the ice howler. Wait a minute. Before Jason could regain his composure, his expression froze. That was due to his sudden realization that that black figure looked rather familiar. Then, Jason covered his mouth in shock. He now knew who the black figure was. Freak, this can't be. Jason gasped in disbelief. That black figure, which tore the body of the ice howler with its bare hands, was really the man whom he saw these 2 days, the one they just had dinner with in front of the campfire today? That was right. The person who tore the ice howler was Norfeller, the man who always followed behind a certain someone like a shadow. Oh my gosh, Jason's eyes were wide open and filled with incredulity. It was as though he did not see Norfeller fight the ice howler, but a mouse rape an elephant. Jason was not the only man who was stunned. The wretched bandit, the pretty priest, and the team of adventurers that had appeared out of nowhere were all gaping as they watched Norfeller land from the sky and tear the ice howler's body. That was outlandish. No one knew what had happened, and no one knew where the young man in a black cape gained his formidable powers to challenge a deadly beast. The huge wound on its back completely triggered the ice howler's frenzy. Although the man and beast just started fighting, the battle had already been pushed to a feverish climax. Compared to this, the earlier half of the battle led by Jason was a mere warm-up for the beast. Although it was provoked, then, the revenge it took was instinctive. In other words, this magical beast that sat at the apex of the Dragon Mountain's food chain did not treat the adventurers as its enemies initially. In its eyes, they were like a few irritating flies that it could choose to either blow away with a sneeze or wrinkle its toes to kill them. But, the entrance of Norfeller changed everything. Although that dagger-like blow on the back of the ice howler was not fatal, the pain it gave the ice howler allowed it to realize that Norfeller was a real enemy for it. The growls of the ice howler became husky and deep gradually. Its pair of red eyes was not as frenzied as before, but filled with hostility and vigilance, and fixed on Norfeller. Any moron would have sensed the dangerous atmosphere. Anyone who saw their intense and bloody battle would feel that they had walked into a coliseum. Norfeller was like a ghost that constantly swooped in front of and behind the ice howler. His sharp nails also ripped the skin of the ice howler every time they went past it. The growls were continuous. Every kind of ice element spells was unleashed like a floodgate towards Norfeller, and despite being powerful, he could only persevere amidst the spells. It was as though Norfeller was a lonely boat in the vast ocean. A little carelessness would bring himself irreversible danger. In the snowing sky, flying ice cubes flew and slit deep wounds all over Norfeller's body. Crystal-like ice walls stained with blood of both Norfeller and the ice howler were pulled off from the ground. The presence of the deep growls and mad chilly wind intensified the solemnness of the battle. From the eternal frost to the frost shock, all these spells cast instinctively by the ice howler turned everything within the radius of 100 meters into ice and snow. Although it was like doomsday, Norfeller showed no signs of cowardice. He maintained his ghostly speed as he trapped the ice howler with his attacks. No ice walls or ice cubes were able to stop Norfeller's sharp nails. The high-ranking vampire continued to tear the flesh of the ice howler, staining the snowy white ground with fresh red blood. At the same time, his hoarse recitation never stopped. The oppressing and suffocating magical waves were like a surging tide. At this time, not to mention the 3 mages, even an experienced man like Jason was dumbfounded by Norfeller's extraordinary magical powers. It was filled with a suffocating sense of evilness that gave him the feeling as though he was walking into an ancient tomb that had been sealed for 1,000 years. The scariest part was his ability to injure an ice howler. The weakest adventurer would know that the skin of an ice howler was extremely firm, and its innate resistance to magic could render all spells below level 5 insignificant. Only archmages above level 15 had the ability to injure ice howlers. In other words, that Norfeller with superb combat abilities and wicked speed was indeed a true archmage. Oh God, Jason gasped, and realized he was beyond speechless. That was so scary. How could a talent so proficient in his combat skills and magical spells appear in front of him just like that? To other adventurers, that was totally an out-of-the-world battle. They were all so immersed in watching the exciting battle that almost all of them forgot that the ice howler had actually cast a fatal frost shock just before Norfeller's interference. Of course, no one would realize that a man was sitting by the campfire comfortably in such a freezing weather. That certain someone was no doubt Lin Li, who was squatting by the campfire. He cast glances at the battle ahead of him while he reached his hands in front of the fire for warmth. F***ck, why is it so cold? Lin Li shriveled. Are you very cold? Lin Li heard a clear voice. Looking back, he saw the girl that was chased by the ice howler previously. She was staring at Lin Li curiously with her big eyes. Yeah, very. Lin Li replied as he huffed a puff of warm breath on his hands. Only he knew that he was not lying this time. The temperature that was close to 0 degrees Celsius nearly froze him alive. He had no other choice either. Although the arcane combustion he invented himself was powerful, it could only alleviate damage brought about by magic, and was not as invincible as to eliminate the cold. Of course, the reason for it had a lot of complicated implications. If Lin Li wanted to endure the hassle, which was to explain it, he had to talk about things like the clash between the elements of ice and fire, the conversion between mental strength and magical elements, as well as the difference between the instinctive spells and the normal spells. Hence, he just kept his mouth shut, and reached his hands towards the campfire as he focused on enjoying the warmth of it. From his reaction, a fool would have sensed that he did not feel like chatting anymore. The strange thing was, that little lady seemed not to perceive Lin Li's body language. She even leaned nearer to the campfire casually and continued the conversation. By the way, I heard that man battling with the beast is your partner, right? He is so powerful. But, since he is your partner, why don't you go and help him? If it was other people without a clear mind, they would think that the girl's desperation in striking a conversation was an act of ingratiation. Yet, Lin Li was not this type of man. He was always suspicious of anyone who treated him passionately. If a meat pie were to fall from the sky one day, he would be testing the meat pie with detection spell to detect if there was a bomb hidden in it. Ha ha ha, I know. You are scared, right? Actually, it's nothing, don't be embarrassed to admit it. Let me tell you a secret, I was really afraid too. Ha ha ha. He couldn't help but admit that this beauty was indeed a talent. From the beginning, she was like performing a one-man stand-up comedy. It was as though she felt no awkwardness when Lin Li's gaze was fixed on the campfire throughout her monologue. She laughed as she continued, just as if she was laughing at her own jokes. Oh, yes. After the beauty talked for a good 10 minutes, she finally got to the main point. She fiddled with the hem of her dress and said in a voice only a mosquito could hear, Could you introduce your partner to me? Huh? Lin Li exclaimed in confusion as he rubbed his nose. He could not think of a reasonable explanation for the girl's interest. Had the world changed? Why would a girl be seduced by Norfeller, a man as cold as ice? Don't be so surprised. Rest assured, I will pay you sufficient commission for that. The beauty waved her arm generously, and continued speaking, how about 50,000 gold coins? As long as you can save my brother, I will pay you 50,000. It's gold coins, by the way, a huge sum of money. Your brother? Asked Lin Li. Yes, my brother was taken away by the robbers. I want to save him. Wait. Your brother? Lin Li paused as he thought of something. Lin Li frowned. If he had remembered correctly, Come On told him that the Castellan of Roland City had a son and a daughter, called Cinder and Yvonne, respectively. Yvonne. Indeed, Lin Li remembered clearly that the middle-aged adventurer called her Yvonne when he ran out. Hell, what kind of a father is he? Lin Li could not believe this. Why did this castellan allow his daughter to venture into Dragon Mountains after his son had been kidnapped? What kind of a joke was this? This was the hiding spot of the Sire bandits. How could this unarmed lady come here with a bunch of adventurers who were barely level 14? Did she think Vanscore needed another hostage? I can't help you with this, Lin Li pursed his lips as he rejected her right away. Seriously, she was the daughter of Roland City's castellan. Wouldn't he be asking for trouble if something happened to her while they were in Sire Town? Why? It's too dangerous. You coward. You're welcome, Lin Li smiled humbly, and ignored the sulking girl as he cupped his hands next to the fire for warmth. Norfeller's fight with the Ice Howler was reaching a climax at this point. The Ice Howler's roars filled the air as endless ice magical element flew by, almost as if the air was becoming frozen. Walls of ice sprouted up and cones of ice wheezed past. No matter how much confidence the adventurers had in Norfeller's abilities, they could not help breaking out in a cold sweat for him now. Anyone who paid a bit of attention would notice that even though Norfeller still moved and attacked at the speed of lightning, he was slowly cornered. The seemingly clumsy ice walls and blind ice cones were occupying more and more space around him, coupled with the eternal frost. It was like a large whirlpool, slowly dragging Norfeller into the abyss of death in the center. The scariest part was the dropping temperature. A suffocating chill was spreading like a plague as the Ice Howler's eyes grew redder and its low, angry cries grew louder. Almost everyone knew that the next frost shock was near. Lin Li looked at the battlefield from afar and smiled unexpectedly. That's right, the next frost shock shouldn't be too far away. You know, Yvonne, Dragon Mountains are not a fun place. You should hurry back to Roland City, or else your dad might punish you for being out so late. After the annoying fight ended, Lin Li's spirit was lifted, which put him in a mood for teasing. Worry about yourself, the girl retorted. Almost simultaneously, a deafening sound rang out like thunder out of the blue, scaring the girl. As pale as a sheet, she flew behind Lin Li and held the corner of his shirt in a death grip, only peeking out from behind him after a while. What happened? Something bad. Something bad did happen on the distant battlefield. While Norfeller was as quick as lightning, he succumbed to the ice magical element eventually. The Ice Howler roared suddenly and released all its ice magical element at once, even at the expense of injuring itself. All at once, the ice walls shattered and the ice cones pierced through the air, covering the world in a layer of snow. Then, a deathly silence followed. All the adventurers, including Jason, held their breath as their eyes fell upon the same ice sculpture. A pale face and a familiar black cloak could be seen embedded in the crystal-clear ice. This is it, Jason's heart sank. This is it, we're really done for this time. The Ice Howler was a magical beast with ancient blood indeed. Its last explosion of magic was truly horrifying. It was not talent or technique, but purely an explosion of strength leading to this depressing scene. Indeed, it was utterly depressing. Even Jason had to admit at this point that everyone was doomed. Neither the unlucky group of adventurers nor his group, which was unknowingly dragged into this, were a match for the Ice Howler. The only one who could go against the Ice Howler, Norfeller, had already been frozen in ice. Right now, a frost shock was what awaited them. Everything was as Jason predicted. The Ice Howler did not hesitate to continue after freezing that annoying enemy, and continued roaring lowly. The ice magical element around them tightened, and the adventurers could clearly see the ice walls melting as the ice cones withered to the floor. The snow covering the ground was as piercing as a glare while it turned into water in a flash. On the other hand, a suffocating wave of ice magical element was brewing next to the Ice Howler. Everyone's expression slowly turned to ones of great devastation, and even Miss Yvonne, who stood far away from the battlefield, continued to hold Lin Li's shirt in a death grip. Only Lin Li remained unaffected as he slowly dusted off his long robe amidst the suffocating situation before reaching over for the ether staff that lay next to the fire. What are you doing? Yvonne carefully peeked over Lin Li's back as her gaze fleeted around curiously. This scaredy cat in a long robe was a strange character indeed. She couldn't decide if he was brave or cowardly, for even though he stayed far away from Norfeller's fight with the Ice Howler, he did not run away, either. Even now, while the Ice Howler was charging towards them, Lin Li was still mumbling nonsense she did not understand. Yvonne could not see Lin Li's face from her angle, otherwise, she would have seen this eccentric guy looking unusually serious. As Lin Li chanted, an almost indiscernible wave of magic slowly started to spread, creeping stealthily like a snake without anybody taking notice, until it reached its target and bared its venomous fangs. The chanting was low and raspy like the sound of rustling leaves, so barely anyone in the stifling battlefield heard it. The only one who heard it was Yvonne, but she did not know what he was doing, even wondering if Lin Li had been scared out of his mind, mumbling nonsense at such a critical time. Time seemed to slow down dramatically in the tense atmosphere. Seconds crept by as the ice magical element gathered next to the Ice Howler expanded. Norfeller remained motionless as he was trapped in the ice, just as though he had fallen into a deep slumber. Lin Li continued chanting as he willed his mind to concentrate on a single wave of magic and ignored everything else. He knew that this wave of magic was getting close to the Ice Howler, much, much closer. Boom! A tremendously loud noise tore through the silence just as the wave of magic landed on the Ice Howler. The ice magical element erupted endlessly, blanketing the surroundings in a layer of snow all of a sudden. Fragments of ice flew across the air as everything was covered in ice in a flash. Then, everything disappeared without a trace. Everyone had the same expression on their face, their mouths agape as though they were screaming but could not make a sound. Their eyes bulged as they stared at the place where the explosion had taken place. Norfeller was slowly picking the ice off of himself as his pale face remained void of emotion. It carried not a trace of relief or shock, as though none of it had affected him, as though it was normal for him to suddenly be trapped in ice and for the Ice Howler to die a sudden death. Nobody knew how much time had passed as time seemed to come to a standstill. Only when Norfeller walked out of the snow did the crowd break into a cheer. Almost everyone looked at him with heartfelt gratitude and utter respect. He was like a hero in the eyes of these adventurers who had escaped death, and they naturally cheered as he returned in victory. As they were lost in their happiness, nobody noticed that the guy who sat by the fire had returned to his tent. Everyone rejoiced in the Ice Howler's sudden death as they had all survived a near-death experience tonight. Seeing the world again after escaping death made everything seem that much better, and even the night breeze in the Dragon Mountains seemed to carry a fragrance with it. All the people crowded around Norfeller and repeatedly thanked him for saving them from the wrath of the Ice Howler. No words seemed too cheesy at this point, as nothing could express the gratitude they had for this hero who had saved their lives. Finally, the leader of the unlucky group of adventurers suggested a campfire celebration in honor of the hero and their successful escape from the Ice Howler. His suggestion was quickly met with the support of everyone, including Jason and his companions. The celebration lasted until midnight, leaving everyone apart from Norfeller drunk and dead to the world. Hence, nobody questioned how Norfeller escaped the ice and managed to kill the Ice Howler at the end. Lin Li's tent seemed especially quiet compared to the celebration outside as nobody told him about it nor had anyone bothered to invite him. Some of the adventurers even looked on in disgust when they passed by his tent. It was dangerous to be an adventurer as they had to fight all kinds of magical beasts and might lose their lives anytime. Hence, they had very, very high expectations of their partners. What they could not stand at all was betrayal and desertion. Everyone had clearly seen what happened during the battle earlier. Even though this fellow was Norfeller's partner, he hid by the fire and did nothing as Norfeller fought the Ice Howler in a battle of life and death. Thankfully, Norfeller managed to defeat it in the end, or else this guy wouldn't be able to face the world if Norfeller died. Of course, Lin Li did not know any of this. Honestly, even if he did, he could not be bothered, as he was busy recalling the events of the fight. While it was a life-and-death experience for the adventurers, it meant something more to Lin Li. It meant something about his own magic system. Every mage went through the same journey, from not knowing anything to vaguely knowing something, from imitating others awkwardly to having their own unique style. The mark of maturity for a mage was to create their own magic system, which was a journey full of unknowns. While some mages only needed a couple of decades to finish this journey, it might take some a lifetime. Still, no matter how long it took, any mage who completed the journey would no doubt be top of their class, and, without exception, their names would leave a mark of glory in the history of magic. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.